Yes, was your chat up on the right-hand side of it?
Correct.
Okay.
Does that work for you?
Yep, it's totally up.
I'm gonna run to the bathroom quick, just so
Excellent.
I don't have to take it during class. I had to go to this funeral. My mom went into the hospital yesterday. So after the funeral, I have to go to the hospital. She's having surgery. Okay, that's nice. So like all in one day. Oh. Are you still being a first part this one? Yes. I will be there. I will be there managing a meet. Is David swim this year? David swam when he was 5. And he would cry. Jump off the block, win the race. And then he hated it. He won every meet he ever swam, but he hated it. So finally, after that, it was kind of unfortunate because with Mackenzie being such a swimmer, I thought, oh good, they'll both do the same sport, it'll be amazing. Yeah, that didn't happen, of course, at all. Say that again. I said, in a way, you're kind of lucky he's not a swimmer because the girls do it before actually showering. I do see their skincare routines. Boys, guys don't. Yeah, and you just put a little conditioner in it, just a little. I get that all the time. That's not mine for sure. So I was like, if I'm ready. Hi guys. So you guys are amazing. YouTube is right there filming, so don't say any bad words. My mom will hear. Miss Warren Willie from the school board is supposed to be here, although she might come in late, and that's okay. Maya's mom was supposed to be here, but she's sick, so Smith is here to fill in as a school board member, so he's going to do it free, and I'm assuming Miss Warren Willie will come down here. As you know, I'm leaving for a funeral. Sam's laptop is all set up, the computer, clicker, is all ready to go for your presentations. You need to know that my mom is in the hospital and she's having surgery this afternoon. I absolutely 100% want to be here tomorrow, but if I'm not here tomorrow, it's because things were terribly wrong. Right, so I'll be here tomorrow. That's the plan. So, but you're going to give amazing presentations, I'm sure. Kyle's my backup filmer. That should archive. So we'll see if Ms. Warren Willie shows up here in just a couple of minutes, and maybe we'll get started since there's only 3 of you. That would be amazing. She's checking it. There's one last thing, you guys. Smith has to leave a little bit early to go to a meeting, and Mr. Neenan is coming in to finish off. Okay, here's word to Sandy at the front desk. Okay. You're gonna be amazing. I know you're gonna be amazing. Okay, I will see you tomorrow.
You guys want to get up and get ready? Because I want to be mindful of your time. And do you guys do a timer? Do you have somebody say it for us? Do the 10 minutes?
I need someone to do something. You're going to wear one.
You guys want to, there's a lot of radio traffic, so I'm not able to get. Let's see if I can. This is Angela to the east kiosk. You guys might just have to get started, okay?
All right.
We'll have to suffice.
A field guide to getting lost.
An argument in favor of its use in the classroom.
Presented by Katya Johnson, Alicia Kiefer, and Sarah Belkat.
It's something that interests me a lot, coming to terms with a world in which we're not lost necessarily geographically, but maybe more metaphysically, more in terms of a world full of surprises. Rebecca Solnit.
Field Guide to Getting Lost by Rebecca Solnit is basically a bunch of essays that talk about the developing psyche and the deeper exploration of it. And it talks about the meaning of loss geographically, spiritually, and also metaphorically. And it provides this exploration of the meaning lost through a number of anecdotes. And some of them talk about the turmoil of rebelling against your upbringing, new life, and getting lost in yourself.
So Dr. Kimberly Scipione has a doctorate in both education and psychology. She provided us with a few insightful opinions on how we should present this book for schools. She believes that mental health would be better absorbed by students if it were taught in a normal classroom environment. If the topic is integrated into a normal assignment, the lessons might become more planted in the students' brains.
So we think the best way to teach this book would be in an English classroom, particularly an honors English class for incoming ninth graders. Psychologists describe a series of changes in adolescence, especially when they're going into ninth grade. And this book demonstrates these changes really well. So we think that a classroom should be grouped up as recommended by the teacher, and then each group will study an essay, probably not one essay called Abandon, which we discussed later. And each of these groups can analyze how each story connects to their own lives, especially as incoming ninth graders. For example, the essay The Blue of Distance Part 2 discusses Native American tribes and how they adopt other people outside of their tribe, and then how those people react to other changes in their lives. And this can be easily demonstrated in a high school environment with new friend groups and being adopted by new friends. And this analyzation of text aligns with multiple Common Core standards, for example, the standard for analyzing author choices, analyzing authors' ideas, and then the analyzation of word choice and usage.
Some other benefits of reading this book is it could be used to address mental health issues, and it will help fight the stigma of mental health by incorporating it into the normal classroom environment. It also brings awareness to life changes or from the middle school environment, and it has some interesting lesser-known history, which could be really interesting, and climate change. It also promotes good critical thinking and a lot of analytical skills for interpreting the writer's meaning.
So the book contains some sensitive and possibly controversial topics, including mentions of the use of drugs and alcohol. There are also mentions of sexuality, rape, and mental illness and death. In the context of colonial stories, there is some racial prejudice, as well as abduction and captivity. Adultery and religion are briefly mentioned. And in the context of the story Oedipus Rex, there is one mention of incest. So most of the really controversial content is very brief, except for the use of drugs and drinking, and unfortunately death. The parents should be informed of all of this prior to their students reading the books, and the students should be informed of this as well. so that they can see where they can skip or if they need to avoid it in their own morals. So the essay Abandon, which Alicia mentioned earlier, contains a great deal of the more uncomfortable, very heavy topics. And while it is very provoking emotionally and mentally, it's sensitive enough that we would not really consider teaching it.
Some background information on the author. So Rebecca Solnit wrote A Field Guide to Getting Lost, and she was born in 1961. And she's written many books, such as Men Explain Things to Me and Far Away Nearby, which have both won many accolades. She's also very active in current politics, especially with issues like feminism, human rights, environmental issues, and a lot more. She herself has also won many, many awards, such as 2 NEA Fellowships for Literature, a Guggenheim Fellowship, a Creative Capital Award, a Lenin Literature Fellowship, and she's also been named one of the 25 visionaries for changing your world.
So, in conclusion, this book contains some pretty controversial issues, but I think it doesn't take away from the important issues that this addresses and that it can be used to address in the classroom. And by using it in the normal environment class, we would be doing like something very helpful for mental health issues, and it would help further develop analytical skills because this book takes a lot of analyzing to understand.
Are there any questions?
Yeah, I'm thinking about your proposal about the text being used for incoming ninth graders, and it's quite a bit of controversial material, it seems, in this text. And as a parent, I would think I'm not maybe opposed to the topics, but it seems like addressing so many of them tells me it's in a very brief nature, and you've alluded to that as well. And I would be concerned that without exploring this in a way that's in depth, would actually do a disservice to students, because these issues do need to be, kind of thoroughly explored, and maybe also in partnership with someone's parents. So can you address maybe that concern that it's not thorough enough with some of these sensitive issues to really get to like the thinking of a ninth grader?
So I wouldn't think that it's explaining away the issues. It's, as Sarah said in her summary, there are a lot of anecdotes within the story about the author's life. And death, use of drugs, drinking, those are all things that are normal, no matter how much we don't really want to see them as that. It's hard to avoid them, and even though she doesn't necessarily address them as right or wrong, she's addressing the moral topics. So that's why we suggested it be guided by a teacher, because while the book doesn't say don't drink, don't do drugs, your teacher can say that along with reading it.
Yeah, I think that while some of these topics are only addressed briefly, it does get to the heart of what the author's trying to say. They're used to support her ideas, which follow much deeper topics in a way, finding oneself through what she's gone through. So you really learn a lot about the author's life.
So I'm curious about the impact this novel has had upon you. Like, why did you choose this, and how have you seen it kind of resonate in, maybe since you've been reading, how have you seen it resonate in your life, or things you've been thinking about?
Well, when I read it, my first impression was that it's pretty heavy. There's kind of a lot being thrown at you. But once you start analyzing it, you start thinking about it, you start realizing how these things can connect to your life. And I started noticing how these different stories can actually show up in my own life, even though they weren't my own life. And especially some of the essays were really emotionally powerful, and they would affect me for days. And
Can
it was
you give me an example of that?
Abandoned.
Abandoned?
the one that we wouldn't recommend.
Tell me, that's the one I'm the most curious about, because, you know, being a language arts teacher, I have a challenging time not teaching a whole text, right? Because I think an author is intentional in why they place all pieces. And when we start piecemealing out, like, well, they're gonna teach these pieces of it, like, to just teach Macbeth by only using Macbeth's monologues, would you get Macbeth? So would a field guide be complete in its understanding and your author's purpose with removal of the Macbeth?
I think it still would be.
Yeah, it would be complete. Abandon was really hard to read because the author's close friend she dies in this story at the age of 22, I think. And throughout the book, you can notice that the author is very open about anything in her life. She, no holds barred. But in Abandon, you can tell that she is very, very uncomfortable talking about her friend's death. And it's just an excruciating thing to read because it goes into her death, the funeral, everything that came after. So.
I apologize for being late and not hearing the first part of this, but one of the things that you talked about was the author herself, and she seems to be somewhat politically controversial. Would you say that about her?
I think she's very politically active, yes. She's a lot of strong opinions, and she's done a lot of work in the public with that.
Yeah.
In this book, I don't think that too much of that would cause. This book doesn't go into a lot of those issues. It goes into
More mental health issues,
Yeah.
rather than political issues.
It was her life when she was very young, well, not very young, a lot younger. And she did a lot of things that we learn about in history class. She, in the 70s, was inspired by the Beat movement and did all sorts of stuff like that. But it wasn't she never said anything about the politics, only the things she did.
So my question would be, do you feel like it might be appropriate that there would potentially be another viewpoint given, another text of some kind that might be from a different political bent? I understand that maybe in this one she may not be. I mean, it may not be political, but everything is political, I've learned in my life. And so I wonder if you would consider having alternative texts that could talk about some of the differences of viewpoints that people might have.
I think that would be interesting, but the trouble might be finding something with a different political viewpoint that still goes just as deep into psychology as this one. And I think that might be hard to find.
a lot of the lessons in the book are actually shown through her own experiences. So finding another opinion on some of that would be pretty difficult.
Yeah.
Because it's all of her own personal thoughts. And, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have brochures.
Enrique's Journey, which is written by Sonia Nazario, presented by Mesra Olimpis and Kirsten Sagan. So some background info on the backstory. Lourdes initially leaves her son, Enrique, and daughter, Belkey, to start a better life in America, hoping to one day bring them there. Throughout his childhood, Enrique is moved from one family member to another, where he faces constant disapproval and bitterness among family members. Enrique finds comfort in drugs and progressively becomes more rebellious and addicted. He starts to feel lost and alone and longs for the physical presence of his mother. The feelings of isolation, abandonment, and rejection overpower Enrique, and he embarks on a 3,000-mile journey in order to see his mother again. On the banks of the Rio Grande River, Lourdes hires a smuggler to take Enrique to North Carolina, where he reunites with her there.
To put the book into a timeline, beginning on January 29th, 1989, Lourdes leaves for America and leaves her children behind. On March 1st, 2000, Enrique leaves for the United States. In early April of 2000, Enrique is a third of the way up Mexico. On May 1st, 2000, Enrique arrives in America. Overall, it takes him 8 attempts to make it to the United States. Most fail because of deportation, migrant agents, and injuries.
El Tren de la Muerte, which translates to the Train of Death, refers to a network of Mexican freight trains that are utilized by U.S.-bound migrants to more quickly traverse the length of Mexico. So these trains are fully functioning freight trains that carry coal and other supplies from South America up to Mexico. And immigrants hoping to make it to America ride illegally on top of these trains because it's a fast way to get from their home country to their final destination.
Experiences for El Tren de la Muerte consist of people being robbed, beaten, raped, and other methods of violation. People fear that the train will mutilate or kill them. These people are rightfully afraid.
On El Tren de la Muerte, Enrique faces constant fear and anxiety. He is robbed, beaten, and captured by various gangs and migrant agents.
The problems. Problem 1. Danger. By migrating north, especially by train, children and adults face never-ending danger and risk of death. But by remaining behind, their endangerment remains the same. Problem 2. Authority. Authorities such as border and migrant agents are known for physically harming and robbing illegal migrants, and there are no laws or rules put in place to stop the violence. Problem 3. New life. After reaching America, illegal immigrants have to work much harder to stay, and because of their status, employment and decent pay can be a challenge to find.
Raising awareness. Children like Enrique come to the United States and hope to reunite with their mothers, escape gang violence, and begin life without hardships. Mothers like Lourdes come to the United States to make money for their families, bring children, potentially return home with funds, escape violence. Although many do not wish to leave, they feel that staying could be worse than leaving. In the end, children face police brutality, physical abuse, drug abuse, and exposure to violence.
Children begin to understand brutality around age 4. The migrating kids see and endure this pain and cruelty. This becomes especially true when thousands of children report being abused at the Mexican border. So far, in 2019, there have been around 45,000 unaccompanied alien children, and 15,000 were being held in late December of 2018.
Under the TVPRA, which stands for Victims of Trafficking and Violence Protection Act, unaccompanied minors from countries that do not share a border with the United States are handed over to the Department of Health and Human Services, and then they go before an immigration court that will determine their fate. However, those hailing from Mexico can accept voluntary deportation and return immediately.
Along the Central America and Mexico border, illegal migrating children and adults face brutality from border agents by being robbed, beaten, and then being sent back across the border. These actions are also common along the U.S. border from border protection agents as well.
Student survey results in politics. For the purpose of this presentation, we surveyed 62 students from various English classes. Close to 42% of students recorded that they aren't aware of their country's own immigration policies. The greatest percentage of students rank themselves a 3 out of 10 on their knowledge of citizens' lives in Central America and Mexico. Yet 48.2% of students take a stance for pro or anti-immigration. While this isn't the case for everyone, our study concludes that high school students tend to shape their political opinions without proper knowledge regarding the subject. Enrique's journey is not politically charged, but it provides background information and factual encounters that allow high school students to take an educated stance on the issue affecting modern-day politics.
Connecting our text to the curriculum. One of the state standards requests to analyze a particular point of view or cultural experience from outside the United States, drawing on a wide range of world literature. Enrique's Journey applies the use of culture from outside the United States to
demonstrate the problems and challenges faced in today's world. Enrique travels to many places where culture is reflected and shows the wide range of world problems.
Common Core state standards also state that by the end of grade 9, students can read and comprehend literary nonfiction in the grade 9 to 10 text complexity band proficiently, where scaffolding is needed at the high end of the range. This is applied in Enrique's Journey because it is a nonfiction literary work that consists of mature content and a complex reading level acceptable for those in grade 9 or above.
Controversial elements and how to teach them. Sexuality. Rape is mentioned throughout Enrique's Journey. Although the specific examples of rape are not descriptive, rape and sexual assault are crimes and controversial topics and may be difficult to teach. The key to this discussion is talking about these issues in class to raise awareness.
Another controversial issue that is discussed throughout Enrique's journey is morality. Enrique uses drugs and various substances throughout his journey, which may be considered immoral by some people. Raising awareness and talking about substance use and abuse is suggested when reading this book. Educating students about drug abuse and the effects on individuals can lead to higher knowledge about controversial subjects.
Violence is one of the most prevalent themes in Enrique's Journey, as police and gangs are violent towards immigrants and those traveling to the United States. Some parts of the book are very descriptive when talking about violence and injuries. Students might have questions and concerns and may need to be notified of the mature content before choosing to read.
Humanity. Reflection on humanity in Enrique's Journey. Enrique's Journey sheds negative light on humanity because of encounters with corrupt police, gangsters, poverty, neglect, and so forth. The nonfiction exposes issues and crimes involving immigration in Central America and Mexico. 58% of students claim to know an immigrant, meaning this issue is prevalent among teens. And a lesson learned was, to discern something positive, one must understand where its negativity derives. An example of the negative aspect in humanity can be found in this quote. Nearly 1 in 6 migrant girls detained by authorities and police in Texas has been sexually assaulted during their journey, according to a 1997 University of Houston study. Another quote regarding humanity in Enrique's Journey is, boys like Enrique are called stinking undocumented. They are cursed and taunted. Dogs are set upon them. Barefoot children throw rocks at them, some use slingshots.
Literary value. Some awards and achievements that Enrique's Journey has won consist of the 2002 Robert F. Kennedy Journalism Award, the 2003 Pulitzer Prize for Feature Writing and Feature Photography, the 2006 Christopher Award, the 2011 Williams College Book Award, and many others, including the Golden Door Award. Enrique's Journey relates to other classes such as social studies because immigration and various immigration movements of the past, such as the Great Migration, are discussed. Foreign relations and politics are also mentioned. Spanish and foreign language is another class that Enrique's Journey relates to. Important cultural aspects are discussed, and Enrique's Journey shows life in Spanish-speaking countries such as Mexico and Honduras. Enrique's Journey helps readers understand the importance of foreign languages, their cultures, and how they impact America today.
Overall impact. Overall, we feel that Enrique's Journey has raised awareness about current immigration policies, has built respect for immigrants and their lives, has confirmed our political stances, and has modernized comprehension of current events beyond the U.S. boundaries. We strongly believe that incorporating this book into English classes can do the same, if not more, for high school students.
Thank you, and these are our sources.
So I'll ask this, the same question I asked before. Tell me about the impact this novel, this text has had on your life since reading it.
It was really eye-opening because I really wasn't aware of the challenges that illegal immigrants faced when migrating from their home countries such as Honduras to the United States. And I knew that it was hard for them, but I didn't realize about El Tren de la Muerte. Like, I had no idea that's how they got there. And the amount of gang violence and police brutality, that was really shocking. Like, I didn't realize the police, you couldn't really trust them when you're in a foreign country.
Yeah, and for me, I'm really fascinated by immigration, but I feel like I don't know enough about it to really talk about it or take a stance. But I feel like the background info in this and just kind of the Enrique story and what he had to deal with confirmed what I felt before that. So now I know really what I feel about immigration.
And I didn't really understand why mothers would leave their children to go to the United States. And now I do, and it's been a really eye-opening experience, seeing that how courageous and brave they are, and seeing the problems that they face when they come here.
So thinking that immigration is such a controversial issue within our country right now, how do you think you as ninth graders, and maybe even take the stance you're a teacher, it could be that way as well, how do you think you would address this in a classroom where you know you probably have really diverse perspectives from, you know, the students in that classroom? Like, think about people that would be pro-immigration, think about people that would be anti-immigration. Even in your survey, you had 51% moderate, which I don't know how you feel about moderate in your survey. But, you know, tell me, how do you think that that would, especially in a ninth grade language arts classroom, how would you address that?
I mean, debates are kind of like, not like heated debates, but calm debates are not necessarily a bad thing. So I guess, like talking about immigration, what your political views on that could be just discussing.
Yeah, I think it's important to share facts before allowing to share your opinions, so to make sure everybody knows really what's going on and how they are shaping their opinions before they express them within the classroom is important.
Well, some people, like their political stances are based around their parents' views, and they might not have all the facts, and this book is full of facts. And before, I honestly didn't really have a view, but now I do, and it's just, yeah.
So, obviously, I agree that this is a pretty controversial topic. So I would really want to make sure that you were presenting some other sides. This clearly is, I mean, I'm assuming that it's trying to paint a picture of why these people are coming here, and that it's not being done in a very good way, it sounds like, right? So I think that it might be interesting to have some kind of conversation around what happens, or how people in the United States are affected by what happens when you have immigration or people coming in like this, right? So I wonder, have you thought about potentially doing some kind of co-taught class where you would have, like, your social studies civics class would be looking at more of the facts and broadening the viewpoint a little bit?
I mean, yeah, it would be really cool to have a companion text that shows the other side of immigration. We didn't really look into that, but I'm sure there are books, and that probably would be a good way to teach immigration since it is a controversial subject.
I mean, Enrique's journey, like, it kind of looks, when you just read about it, it looks like it's kind of one-sided, but it's really not. It's just showing the journey from one immigrant to the United States, but it also covers what happens in the United States, and it gives facts for both sides, like why people think one way, why people think another. So it is kind of both two-sided.
Yeah, I don't think that people have a problem about talking about controversial issues. It's only when one side is presented and people don't have, you're talking about making sure that everybody has the facts in order to have a good conversation, and you would want to make sure that everybody understood both sides of the argument and why we have controversy over this kind of conversation. How old is Enrique?
He leaves when he's 15. His mother leaves him when he's 5 years old, and then he resorts to drugs and abuse and like violence and stuff. And then he leaves when he's 15 or 16.
Yeah, I think it's 15.
I think it's 15, and then it takes him like 8 attempts to get to the United States. He finally makes it and is reunited with his mother.
Yeah, and then his girlfriend and his children, well, his daughter later followed and come meet him in the United States.
How might you address, I want to be clear, this is not my personal view, so, but how might you address someone who would say, I saw a slide where you said this was not politically charged, and yet I felt the information you shared was very pro-immigration, very anti-American. I felt that it was, again, speaking not for myself, but I felt there was a bunch of negative information about our police and our immigration units and our border patrol. So some people might take offense to that and say that that is actually quite imbalanced. So how might you respond to someone who says that this is painting a negative picture of our country, and there's not really a place for that in our schools, which are intended to prepare students to be citizens of this country?
So Enrique's journey really isn't focused on the negative aspects of America, it's mainly focused on the negative aspects of Central America and Mexico. And it does talk about America, and Enrique does end up getting a visa to stay in America.
Yeah, I mean, really, the last quarter or third of the book is just about what happens in the United States. So yeah, kind of like what May said, it's not really painting a picture of America. It's more painting a picture of what's going wrong in Central America and Mexico and what needs to be changed there. So like the police brutality and those things, that's not happening. Well, that didn't happen in the United States in the book. That was all Central America and Mexico.
Very well articulated. You guys did a wonderful job. And the previous group, I meant to say that to you as well. Excellent, excellent work in your presentation. Really well spoken. All right, we're on our third group, right?
And then.
Well, no, and it's that same, same
Hello everyone. Today, Matthew Wilkinson, Sam Mantle, and I, Maverick Malcolm, will explain to you why The Things They Carry by Tim O'Brien can be a valuable resource to enhance learning at Arapahoe High School.
So, author of this book is Tim O'Brien. He was a Vietnam veteran from 1967 to 1970. So everything that you read in this book is like a first-hand account. It's very true. And then some awards for the book is the Guggenheim Fellowship Award, the National Bank Award, or Book Award, American Academy of Arts and Letters, and 2 National Endowment for the Arts Fellowships, a Heartland Prize Award, and a Pulitzer Prize finalist.
So the curriculum, the state standards for 9th Honors History include the option for students to investigate causes and effects of events throughout the United States history, such as world and regional affairs, like the Vietnam War. With this book, you have the ability to analyze and understand the event, and you can use the book to explore how the world has changed and how the event could apply to modern day society. This book would open up an avenue for students to gain an advanced understanding of what really happened in the Vietnam War. Along with that, the book fits nearly perfectly in the 9th Honors History curriculum.
So again, we believe that this book would fit very well into the 9th grade U.S. history class because it gives students a better learning opportunity by providing a first-hand experience of events that happened throughout the Vietnam War, and explains the thoughts and actions that the soldiers do throughout the war and how they cope with the trauma of the war during the war and throughout the war. So it also explains how there are troops in the war and in every war who are fighting for their side, but they do not support the war. So this is a very controversial topic with the draft and everything because there are just veterans that don't support what they're fighting for, which is it's very controversial.
So, a question that would be important to answer would be, why is it important to have a first-person account while teaching the Vietnam War? Well, it's important to have a first-person account war because not many people know really went on in like the camps they set up for battle or like the daily lives of a soldier, and then also the things they physically carried and the internal hardness the war takes on a soldier before, during, and after the war. And then the other thing is soldiers, most were drafted at a very people that were drafting, most of them, they didn't like it, and it's very controversial among them. And then there's very different discrepancies between war and the media.
So going off of that, discrepancies between the media and cold hard facts. We see it every day in CNN, Fox News, and it was present in the 1960s as well. 85% of students said there's discrepancies between the media and the soldiers' point of view. Those people mentioned things about the media twisting words and portraying the news in favor of their causes. This made the war controversial and led to injured soldiers and regular veterans being disrespected and mistreated. As a result, that disrespect led to increased PTSD and caused depression, when in fact they were only fighting to stay alive and were fighting for freedom. Because these discrepancies are also present in modern day society, this book could also be used to teach about things like fake news and yellow journalism.
So PTSD within veterans. PTSD is very common in veterans, and 15% of veterans are diagnosed with PTSD. This disease was not originally diagnosed as a disease, so when veterans were going through the symptoms of this disease, they were kind of a negative aspect was put upon them. So it is important for students to learn about PTSD because, well, in our survey, we found that 80% of students are not educated enough on the topic of PTSD. And this is important for students to know because not only veterans can suffer from PTSD, but anyone can. And it is a sad reality, but school shootings have become very common in the US, and students can suffer from PTSD from harsh events like this. So if students are made more aware of this disease, it's easier for them to recognize it within themselves, and PTSD can lead to depression and eventually suicide. So if students can recognize it within themselves earlier, then it can help them within their future lives. Also, in our survey, 75% of students said that patients with PTSD do not receive enough treatment. So if this disease is made more aware of in schools, then moving forward in modern society, this disease can be made more aware of and eventually lead to better health for patients.
So there are some things in this book that would make it banned. There's a lot of explicit language. Well, it's a soldier, they don't talk very clean. They speak what's on their mind. And that's kind of important to the book because you don't want to have some numbed down version of it. You want to have the truth, like what they're actually thinking and what is really going through their minds. And then another thing is gruesome content, because they'll explain, like this quote here, he lay with his mouth open, the teeth were broken, there was a swollen black bruise under his left eye, the cheekbone was gone. Those are like an example of some things that are in the book. There's also many different gruesome content that could be very controversial.
Overall, The Things I Carried is a phenomenal book that fits perfectly into the 9th grade honors history curriculum. The Things I Carried can be read in excerpts or can be assigned for the entire class to read. If reading excerpts, we recommend that teachers and students read Chapter 1 for background information and Chapter 21 because it deals with ever-prevalent PTSD and psychological disorders in today's society. This book also provides an enhanced understanding of the attitude and morale, along with the experience that soldiers go through. This book sheds new light on war in general, and overall is a great addition to the 9th honors curriculum and is an amazing read in general. Thank you.
Any questions?
Sure. So I'm not sure were you guys suggesting in your presentation there toward the end that students, you would really only want them to read chapters 1 and 21? Are you advocating for the whole text?
Really, it's both. It's up to the teacher if they think that excerpts would work better or if reading the entire book in general would work better.
And we feel that since the honors classes go into more depth, that maybe they could read the whole book. But if in just regular classes, if you just want to get the details or basic details of what goes on in this book, then chapters 1 to 21 are good excerpts from that.
So, and I think the reason I'm asking is my understanding is the text has quite a few overt references to drug use. Is that right?
Slightly.
And I'm concerned that exposing ninth graders to drug abuse as a way to contend with conflict and life challenges would be not the sort of solution to life challenges that I would want to promote. So how might you address that challenge if you were to hear that from a school board member?
I'd definitely say that the book also goes into detail about PTSD and how if you don't say anything about it, then it could lead to things like drug use and drug abuse. But the author, he decided that he'd write about what he did in the war, and he had no consequences of PTSD.
And there was actually little drug use in the book. There was just drug use for soldiers coping with with just trauma from the war. So we feel that if there was better, more efficient help for the disease PTSD, then it could result in less drug use to cope with the effects from the war.
So I think you guys did a wonderful job of connecting it to the standards, and it does seem like it works very well. So my understanding is you're saying they should be taught in history class versus your language arts class?
Yes.
Okay. So one of the things that I think is really hard in this book, and you touched on a little bit, is that one of the first wars that we had that was not a defined good and bad, right? You talked about that a lot of soldiers didn't really even know why they were there. So can you talk to me a little bit about how a teacher might talk about that, or how a class might have discussion around the fact that it was very nebulous and kind of really started us down a path of going into conflict that might be not so clearly defined?
You could like connect it with how like people that were not fighting the war were saying like, well, do we really need to get involved with like South Vietnam versus North Vietnam? How that relates to what the troops were thinking that were going in there, and then they are not as committed to fighting it out the war that they're not 100% wanting to go to.
Yeah, and just you can talk about how the draft is very controversial and how a lot of wealthy men got out of the draft while the people who weren't that supported by family or anything, they had to be entered into the draft. And even though they didn't support it, they were put in there to fight a war, which is not good for them or our country. Because I mean, if you have people fighting in wars that don't even want to be in the first place, it's obviously not going to end up good. So it's just the draft is controversial and the politics behind it.
So I guess my first question, the book this is funny, I used to teach this book. It includes a lot of references to weaponry, really intimate descriptions about how those weapons operate. And in an age of mass shootings and, you know, as prolific as violence is in today's world, particularly in the schools, is it responsible to put a book like this in front of ninth graders?
I mean, in the classroom, if it's in the classroom, I feel that it would obviously be much less, I don't know, it'd be easier to explain, or, I can't.
So it'd be easier to explain with teacher supervision, and it'd be easy to say, you shouldn't do this, and it's just to provide examples for the book, but you shouldn't know how to operate a gun to possibly shoot someone.
Yeah, and I feel that the operation of the gun wouldn't really push someone to do something like that.
Good answer. Okay, and then my last question really, I think one of the big pushes lately is to try to tie in as many current events as we can into classes. And the Vietnam War is almost, 40 years old at this point. Why bring in a book about Vietnam?
Because it gets into the controversial idea of wars, like how we recently, where it was in the Iraq War and how that was very controversial, and how more and more politics have become more controversial as we go on, and also the PTSD factor, how it touches on that and how it's becoming more apparent.
Very good.
Thank you.
You guys got some people's texts. Have an Enrique survey, and I've got a field trip. We'll make sure we go back to who we're supposed to go to.
We did Rebecca's phone. Yeah. I like. Hey, look here. Hi, I'm Mr. Negan. I am actually curious. Wait, so you did the things they carried. Did you guys all read these books?
Yes.
Did you like it? Yeah, I did. Yeah, killer book. What did you guys do? The what? Is it good? What's it about? It's important. What about you guys? Well, you guys did Enrique's journey again. Immigration. What about you?
We did Stolen, which is about kidnapping.
Oh, and are these all nonfiction?
Ours.
Okay. And then, wait, is this a group right here? You three?
It's us.
Nice. What did you guys do?
Beautiful boy.
Beautiful boy. Okay. What did you guys?
Your voice in my head.
What's that about?
It's about a woman who has like an eating disorder and like just a bunch of mental illnesses.
Okay. What other books? A Field Guide to Getting Lost? What made you choose that book?
It was cool.
Did you like it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Rebecca Solnit's like one of my favorite authors. Back here, yeah. Oh, okay. Thanks. What about you guys?
We read all the things we
All the things we never knew?
Yeah.
Cool. So overall, what do you guys think of this project? Like, talk to me about it. What pluses, minuses, pros, cons, what do we got? Group driven? That's pretty sweet.
I like how we got to stick with the book we didn't read.
Okay, yeah, that's important. What else? Yeah, you may. You have to be back soon though. We're out of here in about 8.5 minutes. Well, that's cool. Wait, so next year, who do most of you have? Comp, Dusto. Those are the only two, right? Yeah. Okay. Well, you won't have me next year. Darn it. You'll have me as juniors and we'll all be one of us perfect. Is everybody ready for summer?
Yeah.
What is this rubber hand?
What?
What's the other one?
This one?
Yeah. Where'd that come from?
It's my hand.
These pictures are reasons.
I like the way.
Yeah, it's good. Triple weight. Good.
That's right.
All right. What are all of you doing on your laptops? Oh, yeah, that's good. Okay. Is anybody going anywhere cool for summer? Aruba. Where is Aruba? In the Bahamas? Somewhere next to Cuba.